So after we've done the distal surface of the 4-7, we're going to come out and we're going to change our fulcrum. We're going to be using the outside corner of our fulcrum finger, and we're going to be placing it on the buccal surface of the tooth. So I'm going to place my instrument where I need to start working, which is on the distal buccal line angle of the 4-7. So I'm going to place my fulcrum on the buccal surface of the 4-5. I'm going to adapt the whole side of the cutting edge to the tooth, and then I'm going to roll it out slightly until only the bottom 1/3 of the blade is adapted. Then I'm going to implement my rock stroke and advance across the tooth until I get to about the mid-buccal area of the tooth. My grasp is starting to get a bit tight, so this tells me that I need to move my fulcrum. So I'm going to move my fulcrum slightly anterior to the buccal surface of the 4-4. I'm going to stand up on the fulcrum so that I can get the entire cutting edge on the tooth, starting where I left off, which was the mid-buccal. Roll the instrument out until only the bottom 1/3 is adapted, and then continue my rock stroke until I get to the mesial buccal line angle of the 4-7. When I get to this point, my blade is now too open, so I need to change my fulcrum. So I'm going to go back up to the occlusal fulcrum, but first I'm going to turn the client's head slightly towards me. So now I'm going to go up to the occlusal fulcrum. Again, the side of my finger is on the occlusal surface. So my fulcrum finger is on the 4-5, the 4-4, and the 4-3. I'm going to place the instrument on the mesiobuccal line angle, so the terminal shank is parallel to the mesial surface. Roll it till I can see only the bottom 1/3 is adapted, and now I'm going to use my rock stroke, and I also have to pivot and roll every stroke because this surface is curved. And then when I get to the mid-interproximal, I'm going to stop, and I can use the same fulcrum, only just move it slightly anterior to do the distal line angle into the distal of the 4-6. So I'm going to place it curette on the distal line angle. I'm going to roll it until I see that only the bottom 1/3 is adapted. Implement my rock and pivoting into the mid-distal. Then I'm going to come out, go back out to that buccal fulcrum again. So in this case, I'm going to be on the buccal surface of the 4-4, starting at the distal line angle of the 4-6, whole side of the blade on the tooth. Roll it out until only the bottom 1/3 is adapted, and use my rock stroke until I reach the mid. Then I'm going to stop. I'm going to adjust the client's head slightly. I'm going to move my fulcrum a little bit more anterior, so I'm on the canine now. Stand up on the fulcrum, whole side of the blade on the tooth, starting at the mid. Roll it out to adapt the bottom 1/3, and use my rock stroke and come up to the mesial buccal line angle of the 6. My blade's getting too open, so I've got to go back up to the occlusal fulcrum. So I'm going to move the client's head slightly a little bit more to neutral. I'm going to come up to the occlusal fulcrum, stand up on my fulcrum now, place the instrument on the mesiobuccal line angle, okay, then roll it till only the bottom 1/3 is adapted, and I'm going to use my rock, and I'm going to pivot and roll every stroke until I get to the mid-mesial. When we get to the 4-5, and turn the client's head slightly away from me. I'm going to stay on my occlusal fulcrum. I'm going to go to the distal line angle of the 4-5, standing up on the fulcrum, roll the instrument till only bottom 1/3 is adapted, and use my pivot and my lateral wrist rock pivoting into the distal surface. Come back down to the facial of the canine. Use the opposite cutting edge. Place the whole side of the blade on the tooth, starting at the distal line angle. Roll it out till only the bottom 1/3 is adapted, and use my rock stroke until I get to the mesial line angle. Turn the client's head slightly towards me. Go back up to the occlusal fulcrum. Stand up on the fulcrum. Place the whole side of the blade on the mesial line angle. Roll it out till only the bottom 1/3 is adapted, and use your wrist rock, and you're pivoting the instrument, pivoting your hand and rolling the instrument in your fingers as you go into the mesial. And now the 4-4 I'm going to keep that same occlusal fulcrum, just move it slightly anterior. Start at the distal line angle. Roll the instrument till only the bottom 1/3 is adapted. Use your wrist rock and you pivoting your hand to reach the mid-distal. Come back out, come down to the facial. Now I'm on about the facial of the lateral incisor. Place the whole side of the blade on the tooth. Roll it out till only the bottom 1/3 is adapted. Use your lateral wrist rock, and we're pivoting and rolling every stroke because this tooth is quite curved. You get to the mesial line angle, you stop, turn the head slightly towards you, go back up to an occlusal fulcrum, stand up on the fulcrum, get that wrist nice and straight, place the whole side of the blade on the tooth surface, roll it out to adapt the bottom 1/3 of the blade, and do your wrist rock and your pivot and rolling in your fingers until you reach the mid-interproximal.